Okay, part two of the lecture will focus on the theories that explain how anxiety, arousal that you learned with the definitions in the part one, and how that experience is associated with our performance, the physical performance, and sometimes mental performance. So, there are to explain the relationship between arousal and anxiety and how those experiences affect our performance, there are literally seven theories, okay, and a lot of theories, and I will explain why we have so many theories to the end. Each slide, when I explain each theories with the key concept, you will see some notes in a note section. So if you want to see more details and some references, I put them in the note section for your information. So I'm going to start with drive theory and finish up with the last theory, anxiety direction and intensity, concept model, or textbook it says a directional theory. So let's just start with the drive theory. Here we go. Drive theory in the textbook has a slightly different concept, so I'm going to correct that textbook information with this figure. Okay, so the relationship between anxiety and the performance, you will see y-axis is not performance like a textbook, it says dominant habit, then x-axis is arousal. So differentiate arousal and anxiety definition. Okay, it's arousal. To understand the relationship between this dominant habit and arousal, there is a formula which I will explain now and then give you the concept. So the two formulas, it's almost an identical formula with one slight differences. So habit stands for H stands for habit. Habit is a skill habit, and arousal, A stands for arousal, and habit again, and arousal again, and C now stands for correct skill or skill that you learned. So your experience, so you have that skill, correct skill. I stands for incorrect skill, which means you haven't learned the skill yet. So you're a beginner, or you learned the skill incorrectly, so you don't have a proper skill set yet. If correct habit skill coupled with arousal level, it produces correct response, which is dominant habit response is correct, which means it's good performance. On the other hand, if your habit skill is incorrect, you have not learned the skill yet, that coupled with your arousal level, then you're more likely to produce what? Incorrect response, which is dominant habit here. That incorrect response means poor performance. It's not good, right? That relationship between dominant habit, which could be correct or incorrect, and arousal relationship is linear. Got it? It's not just a simply performance like a textbook says. It is depending on your skill level. Having that said, strength, very simple and easy to understand the relationship between performance and arousal level. Implication. If the skill is new to the performer or skill itself is very complex, then you need a low level of arousal to perform better. However, if a skill is very simple and or correct, well learned, then you need higher level arousal to really produce peak performance. So good example of utilizing this, sprinters on athlete in track field. Sprinters at the starting point, what do? Right before they just get ready for the starting block, what do? They jump and they just touch their faces to pump them up as much as they could, right? Drive theory fits it in right there. Sometimes weightlifters, before their performance on the stage, behind of the stage, what do? They jump and they pump them up as high as they could to perform best. This theory fits in right there. However, have some weakness. It doesn't explain everything that we experience in our performance. Sometimes it's too simple to explain the relationship between arousal and a performance. And that linear is great for some performance, but does it go like endlessly up? Don't we get choked if it's too much? That's the weakness, which lead us to the next theory, which is called inverted U hypothesis. So this is satisfied with the drive theory. Yeah, it explains some, but I don't like some, the certain area of drive theory. And in this inverted U theory, now y-axis is performance and x-axis is physiological arousal. The relationship between physiological arousal and performance, it's not endlessly linear. It is curvilinear. So for your best performance here, you should not have too low or too much. So you should not be too relaxed or too highly nervous about the performance, because that will lead to poor performance here. For the best performance, where it does happen, right there, midpoint, optimal point. We need to have some optimal level of arousal level so that you can perform at your best level. So strength, again, very easy to understand. Implication, we need some level of arousal. Yeah, seemingly it's easy to really explain that relationship even to second grader. When I work with the little soccer players, I use it like that. It's very simple. As it says, if you're a little bit nervous, that'll help your performance. That's the way to explain. However, critics says that midpoint, that middle level, that is a point actually. So how do we find it? Once we find it, our emotion always stays there. No, it moves around. That's the one challenge. Another challenge is we always need a middle level of it. Everybody, all different skill levels, different types of skills, and then this theory got challenged with all these critics. So modified this theory a little bit, saying, oh yeah, we will modify the concept. Here we go. Arousal and performance skill types. If it's a more gross muscle related performance, you need higher level of arousal. On the other hand, if you are using more fine muscle and cognitive fine muscle related performance like golf putting, then you need a lower level of arousal in between other types of physical skills. However, it kept the inverted U shape there. So they have to find the middle level like that, right? Also, they say, oh yeah, it could be different by skill levels. If you are highly advanced player, here we go. You need a high level of arousal. If you're a beginner, you don't need that high level of arousal for your best performance. So they modified that, responded to the critics. The problem is, what if I am beginner but I want higher level one? Or vice versa, like I am advanced tennis player but I cannot handle high level arousal. Where is the individual differences? Can we consider that potential individual differences? That led us to the next theory, which is called individualized zone of optimal functioning hypothesis, IZOF. So in this theory, you will see the arousal level, they call it state anxiety. State anxiety. Is it arousal or is it anxiety? Do you include the cognitive side of it? That's very uncertain. Actually, that's a weakness of this theory. But regardless, there are some level of arousal or anxiety right there. And then what this one is saying, doesn't matter the actual level of it. It's all depending on individuals. As an example, Darian, our classmate, she doesn't need a lot of arousal. It's just a lower level arousal, but not in the midpoint. It's a range. It's called the zone of functioning. As long as you find your best zone of arousal level or anxiety level and you stay in that range, not midpoint, in that range, you're more likely perform at your best. For Rodrigo, oh yeah, I need a middle level, moderate level of arousal, not the point but the range, so that I can perform best. For Elisa, she needs really high level arousal, not midpoint but range zone. As soon as they all find their best arousal level zone for their best performance, that's the way to go. If they get out of that zone, then their performance will suffer. It's a cool theory, very practical. So strength, individualized zone, not a point to understand the relationship between performance and arousal level or anxiety level. Implication, help followers to find their arousal zone so that they can really identify when they can perform best. Weakness is a definition, like I said earlier. What is a state anxiety? In their original paper, it sounds a little bit more like arousal, but they imply also a little cognitive side of it. That's the small weakness. That led us to the next phase of this theory development. So we just covered the theory 1 through 3. These three first theories, earlier theories, which really emphasize physiological approaches. Mostly they try to apply arousal level to understand the performance level. Now we are moving to the next 4 theories, which you will see starting from physiology earlier and tapping in cognitive side, our thinking process side, and going that direction. So next theory is multi-dimensional anxiety theory. This is the theory that really helped us to differentiate mind-body experience, and CSAI2 that we've been playing with use this one as theoretical foundation to develop the questionnaire. So cognitive anxiety is what? Mind. Negative. What is the somatic anxiety? Is your perception of your physiological processes and symptoms, right? So now x-axis, as you can see, no longer is arousal. It says anxiety. Now y-axis, performance. The relationship between let me start with the somatic anxiety. The relationship between somatic anxiety and the performance is inverted U, like inverted U theory. Because of that, it carries the same weakness, like a midpoint issues and all that. So somatic anxiety should not be too low, too high, but it has to be a moderate level to experience best performance. However, the relationship between cognitive anxiety and performance is not inverted U. It is a negative linear relationships. So if you worry too much here, then your performance will suffer. If you experience no worries, virtually you don't worry about it, then you're more likely to perform best, as you can see right here. So for the peak performance experience, according to this theory, somatic anxiety has to be moderate level or a little bit higher, and cognitive anxiety, your mind has to be so calm, which sounds really great, right? So strength, differentiated the anxiety types with the performance. That's a big strength, a big step in our field. And implication, like I said, minimal worries or no worries, and moderate level of somatic anxiety for peak performance. Weakness. Of course, every single theory has a weakness, right? Try to test this theory, and they literally failed. Not really failed. They had a hard time to find good support of this theory using the data. Finding performers who reported moderate level of arousal here, like which is somatic anxiety, but not worried about their performance, which means their mind and body is separated. It's hard to find a performance like that because what? Our mind and body connected and interact, right? So researcher says, yeah, conceptually great. It helped us to advance in the measurements to understand a more granular level of uh, anxiety experience. But in terms of testing the theory, we had a harder time. So next theory actually came out where it's called the catastrophe theory, where it says, yeah, mind and body connect. We need to look at them together, not separating them. Okay, so that's the catastrophe theory. So here, low cognitive anxiety figure this is a condition when cognitive anxiety is low, when cognitive anxiety is high, the relationship between arousal and performance are different. First one now is connected, not separated. Low cognitive anxiety, so you're not worrying that much about it, and the relationship between physiological arousal and performance is inverted U. So when you're not worrying that much and you want to perform better, then your physiological arousal has to be moderate level, not too low, not too high. However, the second figure, here we go. Your cognitive anxiety is high, so your mind is running and thinking about it all the time. Then relationship between physiological arousal and performance slowly go up as the physiological arousal goes up. Your mind is rushing, your body start rushing. Then when your physiological arousal goes further up, your performance will drop drastically, which is called catastrophic phenomenon, and it's hard to recover from that. That's the drastic drop. It's not like going down slowly like inverted U. When your mind is worried and you're so stressed out mentally, your physiological arousal goes beyond the moderate level, then you experience that drastic crash in your performance. And we actually observe this kind of performance quite often in highly competitive professional athletic level, like the tennis. I mean, US Open is going on right now. In tennis, in golf, they play until certain point so well, but some point their performance drops like unexpectedly, hit the bottom, and they struggle to come back, and then that's called catastrophic phenomenon. Look at this performance level here. When you have no worries and physiological arousal is the moderate, your performance level is moderate. For the better performance, peak performance, look, cognitive anxiety needs to high, so you have to worry about it. Your physiological arousal has to be moderate or slightly higher. That's quite interesting. That's the peak performance level. So strength, they talked about mind and body interacting together. Another strength, it explains a highly competitive athletic performance in many areas. Implication, having both higher could induce greater performance, peak performance. However, recovery from this drastic drop could be very difficult, or some people never recover from that. Weakness of this theory, although it's very practical, is this aspect of it. How do we measure this one to prove empirically using scientific method? And they have been struggling with this conceptually. Beautiful, it's very practical. Now we need to test it scientifically. They've been struggling to prove this drop and recovery process, because collecting data here with athletes who are going through that catastrophic experience, that's the unrealistic aspect of it. Okay, so that's a catastrophe theory. Now, next theory is a reversal theory, which is a lot like it's more cognitive now. Arousal came back, not anxiety. Now, y-axis is no longer performance. It's appraisal of anxiety, not interpretation of anxiety, not performance. Okay, so how you perceive experience of that arousal and anxiety, if they perceive it positive and pleasant, or they perceive it as negative and unpleasant. So the relationship between arousal and the performance is not related to the level of it. It's more related to how you interpret it. Regardless the level of arousal, if we perceive that arousal experience as pleasant, either relaxation or excitement, we're more likely to perform better. However, if we perceive, regardless the actual level of it, if we perceive that arousal itself as unpleasant negative experience like boredom or anxiety, doesn't matter the level of it, our performance will suffer. So it's a totally cognitive approach. Yes, strength, it emphasizes the human side interpretation of the experience. Implication, help followers interpret their experience more positive, pleasant way, as a more positive, pleasant experience. However, weakness is very similar to catastrophe theory. This dynamic, up and down, and throughout our day, throughout our performance, whenever we perform something, our emotion ups and downs. Sometimes going well, then you just enjoy it, and sometimes it drops down. Our emotion is just very dynamic, right? And measuring the dynamics of emotion to prove this theory is challenge. And however, it's very seemingly the concept is very applicable in our life. So some practitioners still utilize this concept in their application with their clients and followers. Last theory is directional theory, very similar to reversal theory. That's why earlier I said may not be the theory, but more of suggestion, conceptual suggestion, which further advanced a little bit from reversal theory, as this model suggests how to measure anxiety, cognitive direction of anxiety. So according to this theory, which came out early 1990s, individuals' interpretation of anxiety symptom is important. Of course, the reversal theory said that, and this is the next step it actually emphasized. So when we are measuring anxiety, all the questionnaires normally measures how much or how often, intensity of experience. It doesn't matter to measure direction of the experience, right? So it is suggesting that we need to measure directions of our experience. And also this theory emphasized that if a person perceives high control over what they're doing or confidence over what they're doing, they're more likely to interpret anxiety as a facilitating experience. So Dr. Jones' model is saying stress comes in, of course, individual differences there, and stress and then people perceive that stress experience, of course, that also can be affected by individual differences there. But regardless that, if you perceive that your stress anxiety experience as controllable, then you're more likely to interpret that as facilitating experience. However, if you feel that stress experience or anxiety arousal experience is uncontrollable, out of control, then you're more likely to experience and interpret that experience as debilitating. So this is a questionnaire that I use in the personality topic as when I talked about phenomenal approach. Remember that? That's exactly phenomenological approach here. And Dr. Jones' theory and reversal theory at the same time together. Here we go. How often do they experience over arousal and performance, right? This is not it. We need to measure how they interpret, perceive this experience. So that's a second step. That's the Dr. Jones approach, directional theory. That experience that you just checked, is it debilitative to your performance or facilitative of your performance? Does it help? Does it hurt? And then we need to measure these directions. Okay, so let me revisit SCAD and CSAI2 that we have played earlier. CSAI2 state measure here again. It measures what intensity of experience, how much you experience of all of this, which measure 3 different anxiety subscales: somatic, cognitive, and self-confidence. This is not enough. We need to, according to the directional theory, we need to add another column here to measure how they interpret this experience. Is it hurting or is it helping? Debilitative, facilitative. SCAD is the same thing. This one measures frequency of that experience of trait anxiety. Experience is not good enough. We need to understand how performer interpret that experience as facilitative experience or debilitative experience. So I just finished it, all 7 theories to explain and staggering them and put them together, right? So as you can see, all your theories emphasize a more physiological aspect of it, and then more recent theories emphasize more cognitive side of it. All these 7 theories are working theories, so none of them are bad, none of them are better, and it explains different experiences in different situations. So as a leader who will apply this out there, always see which theory explains your performers or yourself or your followers performance better, and go from there to understand the performance aspect of it better in relation to anxiety, arousal, and stress experience.